Hello, everybody, and happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Art of Inspired Selling, where I am the host, Catherine Evans, and I need to actually make my phone silent. Sorry about that. I'm the host of the Art of Inspired Selling, where I interview successful B2B entrepreneurs, coaches, authors, and today even a rapper that talk about what it's like to be successful in the new normal. As always, my guests are going to deliver a teachable moment to you so that you can take that information and immediately implement it into your business, or if you're an executive salesperson, into your sales day now to close more business, increase revenue, and be the best selling self that you can be. So today, my guest we have is Rajiv RajNATIon Nathan. Now let's repeat that a few times. I invited him to be on the show today because, as you know, I talk a lot about digital personal branding. And in order to show up online with your story and your backstory, you have to be a great storyteller. You also need to have an awesome pitch. Not only an elevator pitch, but if for any reason in the future, you B2B entrepreneurs, if you're looking for revenue, investors, venture capitalists, or whatever it is that you're looking to grow your business, you need to have a sound story and a sound pitch. So my guest today can help you with that. I'm going to read his bio. Known as the heavyweight champion of story, Raj is founder of Startup Hypeman, helping startups not suck at telling their story so they can stand out to their audience and stand apart from the competition. He was named an agent of change by Huffington Post, has given a TED Talk, and been featured in Inc., Forbes, and more. He also is a hip-hop artist, yoga instructor, and host of the popular show Startup Hypeman, the podcast. So let's talk to him now as I bring him on live. And don't forget, interact with us because we are streaming live today on YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Facebook. So welcome, Rajiv, and so nice to have you on the show. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Great, and it's so nice to have a veteran, on the show today. It's interesting how live shows used to be so scary for people, and when people start to understand that video's where it's at, right? I see that you have so much video everywhere, and the comfort, it's just really nice for the audience. So tell me today, let's get to the chat. So if we have people that show up, let me know, you guys, in the chat that you're here. And if you have any questions, we'll be more than happy to answer them. But where are you coming from today?
I am in Chicago, making Illinois, as I like to say.
Which part of Chicago? I worked there for 10 years. I have a little bit of experience there.
You are looking live at the Hype HQ, which is inside of Pilsen, the Pilsen neighborhood.
Okay. Which side is that? I only know kind of waterfront, downtown, south side.
So if you were to go to the
Park.
South Loop, take the South Loop and go about 1.5 miles west.
Okay.
Yeah.
How's the weather up there? Is it already changing?
It has changed. It's quite pretty, actually, at this time of year.
So Rajiv, one of the things that I always ask my guests when they come on is, how long have you been an entrepreneur?
I'm completing my 5th year. Somehow I haven't died yet.
Okay. 5 years as an entrepreneur. And to be that entrepreneur and to wake up every day and to be on point, on task, generating revenue and changing lives, you have to have something internally that drives you to be your best self. So what is it that you look for? What is it? Books, quotes, music, internal drive for success. What is it that's your story that causes you to wake up and get things done?
That's a good question. I think it's the internal drive more than anything else. My why, at least so far as I have uncovered, is a deep-rooted belief in the power of expression. Mm-hmm. And so in some days it shows up stronger than others, but I think ultimately at the end of the day, that's why I keep getting up, is because the things that I'm doing is to both do it myself and help others put their expression out into the world. And even on the days where, it kind of stinks and you're not feeling so great, I think that's why I keep coming back to it.
Expression. So define that for me a little bit. What are different ways that people can express themselves through story?
Yeah, so I think the way to look at it is like everyone has a voice. And I really think that voice is one of the few things, perhaps the only thing, that is truly unique to an individual and by extension, the brand or brands that they build. And it is through, so you have to look at like, how do we get our voice seen? How do we get our voice heard?
Right.
Well, we can do that through telling stories that educate, inform, and the little added sauce on top that I like to add is stories that also entertain. And I believe when we do those three things in concert, that's when our voice truly gets seen, heard, and recognized for its unique qualities.
Okay. And as part of your offering, I know you're teaching corporations, sales, individuals, the methodology that you're using. Who is your target market that you help most of all?
Yeah, well, my company is Startup Hypeman. So as Startup Hypeman, I work with the startup audience.
Okay.
And that really means two different groups. I work with scale stage companies, helping their CEOs align their vision and map it out to a narrative that can be delivered by their sales team day in and day out. I also work with the early stage entrepreneurs who are seeking seed investment from venture capitalists, and I'll help them figure out what should their investor pitch be, what should the story be told there.
Okay. And that's really important. You know, my background is in sales, and I've been with many organizations or different parts of large organizations. And that sales representative needs to own the story, right? They can put a little bit of their own spin on it, like, and this is why I do this. But they need to connect, right? They need to connect with that brand's overarching mission or vision or whatever it is. And I think I have worked for some companies where the CEO, their story and their mission sort of didn't reach all the way down to the sales team. And so in your experience, as you start to see companies grow, when that disconnect happens, what happens to revenue or what happens to sales reps when they don't own that story?
What you'll see happen is the team will get caught in these old Wild West, like gunslinging battles of features, of product features or service features that they're trying to win the customer on. Problem when you do that, and the reason why I say it's like a gunslinging battle is because all of your competitors are also doing that same thing or very similar things. And when your product or your service is pretty similar or similar enough in the buyer's eyes to what you're offering, there's not much differentiating there. And then ultimately the buyer is going to pick either based on lowest cost, who can give it to me for the cheapest, or who requires the least amount of effort on my end to integrate. And that's not where you want your buyers making purchase decisions from, right? You don't want to have to be discounting your value just to win. And you don't want to lose you want to lose what you believe could be an amazing client purely because someone else maybe just had a slightly easier or better perceived easier integration process. Instead, what if they bought on the fact that you delivered your point of view as a company and they actually aligned with your point of view and said to themselves, they not only have the right product for us, but the way they think about this is so fundamentally different than everyone else we've talked to. They are clearly the leaders in this category. Like, they just think about it differently. So I'm buying not only your product, but now I'm also buying the fact that your company has the expertise and the level of thought that I know is going to carry my company into the future. And I want to get on that chariot.
And that's really important. Coming from a background in healthcare sales and oncology sales specifically, a lot of the companies were Me Too companies, right? They had a commoditized service because if they could sell on price, they were selling on price. In the healthcare industry, we don't set the Medicare reimbursement, right? Everybody gets reimbursed the same price. So therefore the price point tends to be neutral. So that's a table stake, right? And so a lot of the large companies have that problem. They don't have the story. They don't have the differentiating point. They don't have the unique value proposition. Or if they do, it was a top down, unique value proposition, not one that integrated the customer to really deliver the message that solved the pain or the problem that their target market has. So tell us a little most of my people have slides, and I think you have slides today. Before we get into our teachable moment, tell me where a little bit of your backstory. Let's not go huge into it, but what caused you to do what you do today?
Well, I think for me, it comes back to that why that I expressed before, which is this fundamental belief in expression and the power of story. So my brain, for as long as I can remember, has just always cared about communication and always thought through things through this lens of like, what's the narrative here? What's the angle? All the way back to, I mean, if you look at like me growing up and the way my brain was working, I was a huge fan of pro wrestling growing up. You know, you see the heavyweight belt back here.
Yes.
In my bio, I said heavyweight champ of story, right?
Yes.
Which is just this never-ending story being told. When I was playing sports video games growing up, I would have my own announcers going on in my head, different than what the game was producing. So I was always like generating these stories. And I started to rap around high school. And then as I got into the professional world, I started out in marketing, worked at an agency for a few years, and then I began to venture off into my own stuff. My first company was built around personal brand development and what's the story that you tell as an individual. And now my second company is Startup Hypeman, working on the company level story. And to your point earlier about there's a top-down story that sometimes is done, the challenge a lot of times is whatever the top-down story that exists is not something that someone would actually vocalize to anyone else on a day-to-day basis in a live interaction. And so I'm really acutely focused on not just what's like the fluffy like PR thing about this, but like what's something that your team will actually feel comfortable saying to the other person that's not going to make them like want to vomit in their mouth afterwards because they're like, I can't believe I just had to say omni-channel, multi-power, whatever. Yes.
All that marketing speak, right? Where the marketing team tends to be in their own silo, and they just hand the sales rep, and the sales rep tends to just, that marketing stuff comes out and it goes in the trash can. They don't use it, read it, or those marketing silos and sales silos. All right. So what are you going to deliver today for value that my audience can pick up and implement?
Well, one of my hallmark things that I like to work with companies on is their elevator pitch. I think everyone is aware of what an elevator pitch is. I think very few companies actually spend the time to craft one that can be delivered over and over again, not just from at the top level, but boots on the ground, sales and marketing as well. So today we're going to cover my formula for how to craft a really compelling, attention-grabbing elevator pitch that gets the other person to lean in and say, wait, you got to tell me more about that.
Yes.
So let's dive into that now.
Okay, that sounds great. And I'm getting my paper out so I can take notes.
All right. So if you're hanging with me still, then you see Will Smith on the screen. Are you hanging with me still?
There we are. I shared it.
Okay. Perfect. Now, the example I like to give here is Will Smith in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air when we think about the importance of an elevator pitch. Now, Catherine, if you want to sing along with me, you can, but you didn't know this when you decided to interview me, but you were going to get a private or actually a live stream concert as well.
Oh,
I'm going to sing the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air theme song here. So if you'll indulge me. Now this is a story all about how my life got flipped, turned upside down, and I'd like to take a minute, just sit right there. I'll tell you how I became the prince of a town called Bel-Air. Dun, 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 dun. In West Philadelphia, born and raised, on the playground is where I spend most of my days. Chilling out, maxing, relaxing, all cool and all shooting some b-ball outside of my school when a couple of guys who were up to no good started making trouble in my neighborhood. I got in one little fight and my mom got scared. She said, you're moving with your auntie and uncle in Bel-Air. Now, I won't go into the rest of the song, but thank you.
I couldn't even contribute to that. All I could do was just a little bebopping over here.
But even just doing that first half of the song,
yes.
Why is this, like, to me, I like to use that as an example because that's Will Smith's elevator pitch for the show. Because if you really break down the contents of the song, and you think about why it's so memorable, yeah, it's in rhythm, so it's you can remember the beat and everything, but what's he really expressing there? He's saying, hey, I had this really rough upbringing and in Philadelphia, And there was a good chance I was going to end up getting into a lot of trouble. My mom recognized this, and she saw the only way to not have me get in so much trouble and actually fulfill my potential was to move me out to Bel Air, California with my family there, because that way I'd be surrounded by the right family structure, the right educational system, and the right overall resources and support system to ultimately grow into the man that she knew I was capable of becoming. Right? That's the message being delivered in that elevator pitch or in that opening song. And that's why every episode of the show makes sense. Because if you had watched that show, but you have never seen or heard that introduction, you'd spend the entire episode trying to piece together what's going on here. Like, I don't get it. Like, what is this guy doing with these other people? But because you have that introduction, because the elevator pitch is there, you know exactly what's like, at least the basic plot of every episode. And that's what your company's elevator pitch should do. It should be able to tee up for your quote unquote viewing audience the basic plot that they are about to get involved in. And so there's not, when you end up having that meeting or when you're deep into the meeting, there's not this confusion about why are we here? What do these people do? Because the elevator pitch was so strong. I like to think of it as like your elevator pitch is your movie trailer and your meeting, whatever your deeper dive with your client is the movie. And we tend to not see movies if the trailer is terrible, unless that movie has Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in it, in which case we're going to see it because it's Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. I don't have his muscles or his charm though, so I can't get away with having crappy movie trailers and bad movies overall. Now, let's look at how do we actually craft the elevator pitch.
Sure.
Going deeper into this, and I just want to make sure you see the Batman slide now.
Everyone should see that.
Okay, great. I like to think of an elevator pitch. Well, we got to understand what the positioning is first. And to understand what our positioning is, we have to think of ourselves as a superhero. Why? Because superheroes help and save people from something that's going on. I specifically like to use Batman because he did not have any supernatural ability about him. He just was someone who happened to combine access to capital with leveraging technology to serve the public good. Access to capital, leveraging technology. Does that sound like companies to you? Sounds like a lot of companies to me.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So every company is Batman. And when we think of ourselves as Batman, when does Batman show up? Well, Batman doesn't swoop in and save Gotham on a sunny day, does he? Here in Chicago, it's 75 degrees today. No one's got a care in the world. COVID aside, no one's got a care in the world. You don't see Batman swoop in and say, I'm here to save you, right? If he did, people would think he was crazy. Instead, Batman swoops in when something has gone terribly wrong, when the Joker has blown up the hospital, when Bane has imploded the football field, when the bank has been robbed, when there's crime in the street. So, to me, the first thing we have to do is develop our positioning, which is what I call the superhero strategy. And this is for internal reference at a company.
Okay.
The superhero strategy says that in order for a superhero to exist, in order for your company to exist, there have to be three things in place first. Number one, a person in distress. Number two, a village on fire. When those two things are there, then number three, some superpower can get activated. When you have that superpower activated, then the superhero can come in and save the day. Or, in business speak, target audience, core problem, approach, your approach to that problem, and ultimately your solution. This is the exercise to go through first to figure out what is your positioning relative to your audience. And this is purely for internal reference point only. Once we do this, then we can create the external facing elevator pitch. And the formula I'm about to give you is one of the most powerful formulas you'll ever come across as it relates to communication, but also one of the most simple at the same time. Now, Catherine, have you ever learned Spanish, or do you know any Spanish that you know what que pasa might mean?
Que pasa? What's up?
Exactly. What is up? What's happening? Right? That's what que pasa means in Spanish, and that is the formula for your elevator pitch. All you got to do is give them the business. Tell them what's up, what's going on, what's happening. PASA is the acronym here. And what does that mean? Problem, approach, solution, action. Problem, approach, solution, action.
Well, I'll add that to the notes while you're talking here.
Of course. I'll say it one more time. Problem, approach, solution, action.
Here we go.
When you communicate in this fashion, you are saving Gotham when it needs saving by highlighting the problem first, as opposed to being Batman on a sunny day and starting with the solution. The reason why this is so effective is because by starting with the problem, you are providing context and frame of reference for why you should exist. But most importantly, you are leading with empathy. You are showing your listening audience, your prospect, your customer, your client, whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
You are showing and proving to them, I understand the way things are today for you. I get it. I relate to that. And that's why our company has decided to do something about it, and here's what we do. Your action step is your call to action. So depending on your use case for your elevator pitch, this is always going to change. This formula works really well, for example, as landing page copy. And in that case, your action step might be something like click to request a demo, or talk to one of our experts, or talk to a sales rep. If you were live on a first call, a discovery or a demo call with a prospect, and you would want to kick off that conversation with your elevator pitch, it would be kind of weird to end your little monologue by saying, so click to request a demo. Because they'd be like, what do you mean? I'm already on the demo. Why are you talking like a robot now? Now, in that case, your action step would probably be something like, tell me, can you tell me if you relate to that at all, right? You ask them a question of some kind. So there's your very simple but powerful elevator pitch formula. Que pasa? Problem, approach, solution, action.
Okay, does everybody get that? No, I don't see any questions here, but I did add all of those notes to the comments, so they'll be there for future reference for people.
Awesome. And that's my contact information.
That's the elevator pitch formula right there, you guys. So tell us a little bit about a story about one of the recent companies that you've worked with or that you've helped, maybe where they were like, what I like to say, is understanding where they were before you got there. Then you understood the gap and then you filled that gap. So give us a little bit of a story about how one of the companies that you worked with and what you were able to do once you start maybe an early startup company and the founders when they were working on their venture capital pitch deck or even their pitch.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll talk about a company that I've worked with in Australia actually called Avana.
Okay.
Now where they were at, they had just raised some capital and were about to onboard their first sales team. Mm-hmm. And they had done enough to be able to get investors to put some money into them. But when they looked at, okay, now how are we going to actually put this into market? That's where they just were kind of confused. How are we going to talk about this? They didn't really even have much of a pitch aside from talking about their product. And for a reference point, they are a well-being marketplace. So with Avana's platform in Melbourne, Australia right now, if you're looking for, say, a massage, if you're looking for myotherapy or myofascial release, if you're looking to go to a physical therapist, all these kinds of things, mm-hmm. They've got a platform where you can book directly with those practitioners and get an appointment same day if possible.
Okay.
Now, when we looked at how are we going to communicate to that audience, because they had to look, we need to get actual practitioners on our platform with our sales team. What we did was that process. We created the superhero strategy, and then we built the K-PASA pitch. And the idea behind it was, again, context, frame of reference, and generate that empathy. And so what their sales team was able to do was use that elevator pitch when they were calling up those chiropractors, those massage therapists, those you name it, and used an elevator pitch that we created, which in their case, I don't remember the exact words, it was a little while ago, but it's centered around the idea that the chiropractors, or insert market name, insert audience name, mm-hmm. Were looking at their calendar and realizing they had one too many openings than they were comfortable with, and that Avana's approach was that we help you fill the white space in your calendar. We've got this booking system to just feed clients to you through our platform. That elevator pitch was actually helping them get past the hardest people to get past in business, the receptionist, and getting them past them to have those conversations with the chiropractors and insert practitioner type name here, have those conversations and then onboard them onto the platform. And their first sales rep in his first month, actually, I think his goal was to do about 50, and he did, I think, 120. He onboarded 120 customers that first month, and then over the course of his next 6 months was onboarding an average of about 100 to 120 every single month.
Wow.
And so when we have that powerful messaging, it drives it home.
Yeah, and this was obviously pre-COVID. So was this in-person sales, or were they doing these sales over the phone?
This was pre-COVID, but it was still over the phone.
Over the phone. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's powerful because right now a lot of the face-to-face sales reps are grounded, right, until January or February. So this is a really good time, VP of sales or, district managers, to maybe take some time and look at what are you doing? What's the approach? The first person that's picking up the phone now, right, is that receptionist. And they're just screening all the calls because they're probably, maybe they're even sitting at home themselves, or the patients are just coming in. It's a different world. So they don't have time for a lot of, hey, what's up? How are you handling COVID? They don't want to hear that anymore, right? They want to know in 20 seconds, 30 seconds, how you're going to solve that problem for them, and that you've done your homework and you identify what the problem is that they're experiencing. So
one thing that's really powerful too in that formula, especially in a B2B setting, is to say, when you highlight the problem, this trick I call diffuse it across the market. What I mean by that is you're probably going to be very unsuccessful if you send a cold email to someone or you call someone and you say, hey, I know you have this problem. I know you're bad at this thing. It's probably not going to go over well, because even if your statement is true, they're going to be like, you don't know me. Who are you? Get out of here. Like, who are you to tell me about my business, right? So what I like to do is what I call diffuse it across the market instead. So instead of directly accusing that person of having any sort of issue, you say it instead in a phrase such as, we talk to blank who tell us blank. So in the Ivana case, hey, we've been talking to some chiropractors recently, and they've told us they've got one too many blank spaces on their calendar than they're comfortable with. When you do that, when you diffuse it across the marketplace, what you're effectively doing is providing social proof by saying, hey, I talked to other people. And it proves in the process that you're not some outsider tapping on the glass trying to get in. You're in the game with them. Like, you're already talking to people. And you highlight the problem without directly saying that this person has a problem. But by highlighting, saying others have it, it makes it okay for them to admit they might be struggling with that thing too. I'm not saying you have this problem. I'm saying other people have it, and they're pretty similar to you. Maybe you might be able to relate.
99 I talked to before you have that problem. But in a startup world or in a new, I'm sure there's a lot of businesses being launched right now, right? There's a lot of people, this is their opportunity to launch that thing that they've been talking about. So this elevator pitching, this methodology, the framework that Rajiv is giving is also really good to think of when you start to write your messaging, right? When you start to do your messaging with your collateral, diffusing it across the markets, when you can say that type of thing when you're writing to people. It doesn't necessarily have to be face-to-face or over the phone. That same, for example, for me, clients come to me when they are looking for a new channel to gain leads, right? Their leads are dried up. They don't know what to do. Maybe they used to speak from the stage and now they are stuck behind their computer, right? So mine would be, boy, I've spoken to a lot of coaches and e-course creators and people that are used to selling from the stage, and what they've told me is, right? And what I've learned from them is most of them are. So that type of language will help when in your social selling or in your emailing or whatever you're doing, so that those people can start to emotionally attach to you and understand that you've done your homework and you're talking to other people, and maybe they're saying, oh, wow, somebody else has this problem.
That's a perfect example, because what you're doing right there is indicating that the person you're talking to, you're not accusing them of anything, but you are making it okay for them to admit that something might be wrong because others have already admitted that.
Yes. And then here's something more I'll say, because I talk to a lot of startups as well, is that don't guess. This isn't the time nor the place that we start guessing what the problem is that we are solving in our target market, right? You need to do your market research. You need to get on the phone with your target market. So what are some of the ways, Rajiv, that you have your customers, if they're they've validated their offer maybe, or they've validated their platform or tech or whatever, are there any market research activities that you give them so that they can gain a little more insight into the problem when you're working on positioning or their elevator pitch?
Yeah, I do have to put the disclaimer out there that don't ever say we talked to blank who tell us blank if you've never actually talked to blank before. So I'm not advocating anyone go out there and lie. Definitely
blank.
Yeah, have a base to go off of there. So how do you get that base? Well, what are your existing customers, right? Go to them. Have conversations with them. If you don't feel comfortable doing that yourself, have someone on your team who doesn't have any sort of customer interaction in their role. Have them be that person, or have an outsider like Catherine, right? Have someone who you have talking to them who's unbiased in the process. You can just ask questions to learn. And the goal of that conversation, not to upsell them or anything, it's just to learn.
Yeah.
Another area you can look is, are you recording your demo calls, your discovery calls? You should be. Go back to those recordings. Look at what they are saying in the beginning parts of those calls. I mean, if you're running those calls well, you should be learning about them first before you go into any sort of detail about your product. So what are they saying in those early parts that they're struggling with? Another thing you can do as well this would be part of the meeting booking process, but you can use it as market research. I don't know why more people don't do this, but when someone books a meeting with me through my Calendly link, and, you could use Mixmax, whatever software you use. I'm not saying if you use Calendly. But when someone books a meeting with me, the booking process includes a 4-question survey. And I have 4 questions I'd like to know to better understand their business before I talk with them. So in my case, the things I need to know are, how big is your company? How much have you raised, or are you bootstrapped? What's your MRR, your monthly recurring revenue? And what's your number one challenge related to pitching or telling your story? And those things, that gives me exactly what kind of customer are they going to be based on those qualities. And then the number one challenge question, not only does that then tee up the conversation, but I also have this archive from every meeting that's been booked with me using that link of, here is what the market is telling me.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm hearing, right? And then I can use that to say, hey, I've heard from blank and they tell me these things.
And so let me simplify some things. So if you guys are setting up your Calendly, which is free, but if you're going to start asking questions like this, then I believe you have to upgrade to the paid version, right?
Yeah. Which isn't a whole lot. I think it's $10 a month or something.
I'm not even sure. Just pay for the year and be done with it. So
yeah, exactly.
Don't worry about it. It's worth it. So then all of this information that you gather, right? What if you can then Dad, I'm super big into repositioning data. And now if you've booked 100 appointments, you can go back and you can mine that data and you could create a case study from it, right? Or you could create some sort of infographic, or you could say, then now you have some social media posts and now you have a story, right? You're the storyteller. Yes, we surveyed. Well, they don't need to know it was the appointment people, but we surveyed 100 people. And these were the number 1, 2, and 3 problems, or people with bootstrapping had this problem. I mean, there's so much data you can get from asking those questions. And salespeople, you have to do your pre-call planning. You have to know in advance what you're going to say to the people you're going to get on the phone with. It isn't oh my gosh, who's on my calendar next? Really click, let me get on their LinkedIn profile, where, oh my gosh, they don't have a website. And then they just show up, so hi, how'd you hear about us, right?
One thing that is I want to point out as well, because you talked about how you could map that information into a story, whether it is your short form elevator pitch, whether it's something longer, whether it's your sales deck that you use within the sales process itself. Getting the problem right is more important than anything else. And my dad always used to say that he's not a salesperson at all. He's actually an engineer, but he always used to say this. And at the time, I was like, oh, whatever. But then you realize later, oh yeah, your parents are right. He used to say, a well-defined problem is already half solved. A well-defined problem is already half solved. So if you can define that problem, yeah, Papa Nathan. If you can, or Papa Nation, maybe I should say, if you can get that problem really honed in, you don't have to say so much about your product, because the solution starts to write itself. If you articulate the problem well enough, they can start to make their own assumptions. Then about what it is that you do. And then you don't have to worry about, oh, did I say that we have this feature? Did I make sure that we phrased our product in this way, right? You don't have to worry so much about that. The other thing that I want to point out here, again, whether it's an elevator pitch or whether it's your sales deck or something longer form, I have studied a lot of different ways to tell a story. And one of the hallmark ways that I've modeled off of for the work that I do is actually Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which, I'm sure everyone's familiar with. And the interesting thing about that speech, it was roughly 16 minutes long. And we know it as the I Have a Dream speech, right? It's not until, I think, 11 and a half minutes in that he ever first utters the phrase, I have a dream. In fact, what he does is that first 11 and a half minutes, he builds up the problem. And then he goes into, well, so here's my idea. I have a dream, and here's what that dream would mean. And so again, even that's perhaps the most influential speech of all times. He captivated an audience, hundreds of thousands who showed up live and millions who watched on TV.
Yes.
He captivated them by highlighting the problem first, by being able to relate with the people who cared and empathizing with them before talking about his great solution, if you will. So in that same sense, when you're having your interactions with prospects, be more like that, right? If he waited 11 and a half minutes in a 16-minute speech, so roughly 70%, until he started talking about his ideas, surely you can do the same.
And using that, I don't know that I can simplify that so much into a formula that I use in my business, which is the problem agitation solution framework. So I like that. I use that with my writing. I use that with my LinkedIn profiles in the company. So the problem, what are the top problems? So he was talking about the problems that the nations are having. And he was a great storyteller, right? The people were just on the edge of their seat. They were following that story, and he was building it up. And he was helping them see the dream that he had, right? They saw the problem. He agitated the problem more with what if and how. And then you're right. The very easiest part is the solution. So they were emotionally engaged with him. They followed the problem. They followed his agitation. They saw themselves in the story and then closed with his solution, right? So, the agitation part of that, I think, is really helpful and key as well. I like to call it the fallout of the problem. It's the same thing, though, right? So if there's a problem, what does that then cause for them? Yeah. Right. That really helps drive the point home. And once you solve the current problem, you solve for the current problem, what new problem is going to happen? So that if you get them beyond the problem that they have, what's the next problem? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have all these clients now. What are my systems? Are my systems and processes in place for this? So they're already so far beyond the problem that you're solving. You're just they're going to pick you up and carry them with you, right? Yeah. So that, and then that will lead into further business perhaps, because you've already proven yourself, and now they're integrating you into their system. And it was like an internal inbound lead, let's say, right, as they're carrying you to their solution. Yeah. So the idea is to get them to think to themselves, wow,
this person, this company really just gets me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I strive to be that copywriter. I strive for it. Right. I want people to read my email and go, oh my gosh, she sent this email. It was me she was wanting. So before we wrap today, I'm not going to wrap. Before we W-A-R-W-R-A-P wrap, before we wrap, tell us how people can get in touch with you. In our email that went out, in the description went out, they saw a little bit more of information. We met on LinkedIn, as I do most of my guests. Tell me kind of who you're looking to work with. Is there a specific niche that you really like to shine in? Do you have any workshops coming up? How can people get in touch with you so that they can learn the framework? How are you working with people now? Are you doing it on Zoom? Are you enrolling people online? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes. So first off, you can find all my information at startuphypeman.com. You can also email me directly, Rajiv, R-A-J-I-V, at startuphypeman.com. I am almost annoyingly active on LinkedIn. Find me there as well. And I'm sure Catherine will toss the URLs and stuff in the chat and in the notes after this.
Yes.
My podcast is also called Startup Hypeman, the podcast, where I interview different startup founders and leaders in the startup ecosystem on different growth strategies that they're enacting to grow their companies. I work, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, I work with startups at two distinct stages. There is the scale stage company, where I work closely with the CEO and the sales team, helping the CEO craft a narrative that aligns and maps their vision to what the sales team is delivering on those boots on the ground demo calls day in and day out. So that way they have less deals stall out or get that initial interest but then ghosted.
And in that scale stage, are they well funded? I mean, they obviously have already hired salespeople, but how many salespeople do they typically have? Are they inside sales or outside sales?
It's a good question. Thank you. You should have, I would say, 3 sales reps at that point if you're going to talk to me.
Okay.
You should be funded or bootstrapped to at least $1 million in annual revenue.
Okay.
And every company I've worked with has been inside sales reps, where we can actually look at a recording of what you're doing, whether it's through Zoom or whether it's an audio recording over the phone. And then on the early stage side, if you're a startup looking to raise capital, talk to me there. We can work on your K-Pasta elevator pitch for investors and your pitch deck, the story you're going to tell through your deck for investors. You can be any kind of company there if you're seeking seed stage capital.
Okay. Perfect. All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest. And I hope you guys have learned. I love the format that he's using. I love our conversation that we've had. As you know, this episode will be available for you to share with your audience. So we can use this to share, and we'll be repositioning it in the future. So stay here for a moment, Raj, as I wrap. You guys, thanks again. We'll be back next week where we'll have more information for you on how you can grow your company with the wonderful entrepreneurs that I'm bringing on that will not only help you just survive in the new normal, but they'll help you thrive. So thanks a lot, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next week.